Hello class. Today I'm going to show you how to embed quotations. I'm going to show you how to punctuate as you do that. And I'm also going to show you how to change words in the quotation so that it makes sense in the flow of your paper or essay or argument. First thing we need to realize is that there are three kind of established ways of embedding quotations when you're writing a paper or an essay. There are others, but these are the three main ones. I started this by showing you this quote right here. As you can see, it says, "I remember," the old man said, "I know you did not leave me because you doubted." And that's on page 10 from Old Man and the Sea. So the question is, why are you using this quote? You need to know why you're using it. How is it helping your argument? It's essential that you know that. Once you know why it's helping your argument, do you know that this is the best quote? And once you know this is the best quote to use, then the question is, how do you actually embed it into the argument? So I'm going to show you three ways. The first is called a dialogue quote. This is where you simply say, hey, this is in the text, and then you go about using it to further your argument. So I showed you two different ways here, and I ask you to consider what is the correct punctuation that I would use to embed this quotation. So you can see that the first one says, Santiago says, "I know you did not leave me because you doubted." Okay. When you have this kind of embedding, you put a what? What do you think you put right here? It's a comma. Okay. Now look at the next example. Santiago tells the boy. You see how it looks a little different because it says the boy after tells. So this appears to be an independent clause, right? But it's not, because it's being used at the beginning of a quotation. It's kind of the tag that introduces a quote. And it's not a complete thought because you're expecting something to come next. That's the key. You're expecting something to come next. So it's still a dialogue quote, and you're going to use a comma. Oftentimes we use words like says, use words like explains, describes, and there's a myriad more of these potential verbs that you can use when you're using dialogue quotes. I'm sure you can think of many more. Now let's move on to the second type of quote, and as I'm doing this, I'm going to teach you that you can also change what's in the sentence inside of the quote so that it flows with the argument. These are called flow quotes. Look at the first. Hemingway emphasizes, I'm right here, Hemingway emphasizes that Manolin did not leave Santiago because Manolin doubted. You'll notice that I took the original that said, you did not leave me because you doubted, and I changed it to did not leave Santiago because Manolin doubted. I did that for the sake of my argument because I'm using the quote in my paper. So you can actually change the words, pronouns. You can actually change verb tenses and verb forms and all kinds of things so that it flows with your argument as long as you leave the original intent of the author in the quote. So taking out me and replacing it with Santiago and taking out Manolin and replacing it with you is perfectly acceptable, and that's what I did. What punctuation do I need here? You don't need any punctuation because you're using it in the flow of your argument. That's key. You'll notice so far that at the end of it, I've put 10, and I didn't put Hemingway space 10. I would add the word Hemingway if I were using two or more different sources or stories, and I'm referring to more than one. But I'm only referring to Old Man and the Sea, and I'm only referring to one publication of it. Therefore, I do not need to add the Hemingway. But if I were using any other sources, I would have to put Hemingway 10 in these. Okay? Moving on. Santiago knows that it is not because Manolin doubted that he stops joining Santiago in the boat. Notice that I put the quote in and then I continued my sentence. And when you do that, you just use punctuation as you normally would. And in this case, you don't need any punctuation. So it's correct the way that it is. Now moving on to the colon quotes. Now these, I'm going to ask you what punctuation mark to use, but you're pretty smart. You'll figure it out. Says this, Santiago wants to comfort the boy by reassuring him that he can see the boy's intention in joining a different boat. And then suddenly here's the sentence that I'm using. I know you did not leave me because you doubted. Now, in this case, I have a complete thought right here, don't I? That's a complete thought. I could have just continued my argument with another sentence. But instead, I embed this quote, and I do that with a, you guessed it, a colon. Put a colon right there. I'm embedding this quote here as evidence of what I just said. That's the key. A colon, the reason we use colons, I'll go ahead and put it down here too. The reason we use colons is to say something like, let me show you. A colon says, let me show you. And that's what's going on here. So I could just as easily say, Santiago wants to comfort the boy by reassuring him that he can see the boy's intention in joining a different boat. Let me show you. I know you did not leave me because you doubted. See how that works? Then finally, this last example, I went ahead and put the colon in, but you'll notice that I had to do something weird with the quotes. I have a quote within a quote. And when you have a quote within a quote, the initial quote is in double quotes, and the quote within the quote is in single quotes. And you can see this here. Hemingway uses a conversation between Santiago and Manolin to show the boy's confidence in Santiago. Let me show you. Remember, that's what the colon means. Then I do the double and the single together because this is both. It's in the quote and it's in the single quote. I remember. And then the single quote, the old man said, period, and then the single quote again. I know you did not leave me because you doubted, single double quote. And then you still have to put the page number at the end. We can look at this more. You're going to get examples of this in a second lesson on no red ink, not in the initial lesson, but I thought I'd go ahead and put that in here anyway since you're writing paragraphs about Old Man and the Sea, and you're going to want to embed correctly as much as you can. I'm going to be very gracious and patient with you as you're learning this. I know that you've learned some of these skills before, but some of them may be new. And when you get them wrong, as long as you're correcting them and learning from it, you're going to do just fine on this paragraph and in subsequent papers and essays. I hope this has been helpful in learning how to do quotations, the flow, the dialogue, the colon, putting in brackets, and doing single within double quotes.